What's next for IT? In today's economy, technology touches every aspect of the day-to-day operations of business. There has never been more pressure on IT to deliver for our organizations. So what can we expect over the next decade? We need to think differently about how we approach our work to continue to thrive into the future. This requires all of us to be intentional in how we look at our role going forward. Smart IT is an approach to getting the important things done by transforming the way we think, work, and lead. And now, let's disrupt the status quo, simplify the complex, and reduce risk the smart IT way. So everyone, welcome to another episode of the Smart IT Podcast. Today, I'd like to welcome Monique to the show. So we're going to have some fun here talking about ways to do some experimenting, some discovering, finding different ways to help impact the business and the things they're looking to do. So welcome to the show, Monique.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Well, I just met you recently in a little bit of training we did for creative problem solving, which is a fun workshop we did together. So good to meet you there.
Yes.
So got a chance to chat a little bit, got a chance to see some of your background. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity to further our discussions on some of the things that this podcast talks about. So we're all about taking a look at IT and seeing what's ahead for us professionally, how we can help develop our skill sets more from thinking about team building, leadership skills, design skills. So I was looking at some of the work you've done in the past, which you're currently working on. I said it'd be good to get you onto the show, talk a little bit more on some of these interesting topics.
Yeah, I love talking about what I do and what my teams do, and most importantly about how we can work together cross-functionally, because nothing gets done unless we're all working together, because it's truly systems design problems that we're solving. It's not just something relegated to an app or one department.
Yeah, and I noticed basically no matter what the initiative or project is, it's just what you talked about. You can't do it by yourself in a room. You can't do it with three people. The teams are getting larger. The number of teams you have to interact with are getting larger, and there's a lot of different stakeholders involved. So the old classical trying to have somebody facilitate and herd all the cats to get everybody on the same page to get things done are a big challenge for a lot of teams here. So let's kind of start there about, what you've seen in your experience when it's not 5 people now. It might be 25, 30, 50 across different time zones, across the world potentially. You got different demographics, you got different ages, you got different personalities, all these different people you're trying to interact with and bring together. So let's kind of talk about how do you kind of get your arms around those challenges.
Yeah, and it's especially hard now because so much is remote, right? So it used to be that, I haven't been dedicated in office for over 3 years. And so what I tend to do now is, irregardless of the size of the company that I'm working with, I, if possible, like to give myself some bandwidth to just really observe and listen and attend as many meetings as possible. So, for example, I was working at Heap and I was running their research department, and it was relatively small. It was still startup mode, maybe 500 plus employees. And strategically, I wanted to spend my first month, 2 months, if possible, just kind of learning the landscape and making connections, observing. I always check out the org structure, but sometimes that's not indicative of who's really, holding the reins. And so I think forming those relationships as early as possible, or at least setting the foundation for them, via active listening, via understanding what are their pain points? What is marketing really struggling with? What sales really struggling with? What are the engineers struggling with? And using, the empathy and the active listening and ensuring that I'm hearing the problem and trying to distill that as opposed to, reacting to what are probably symptoms. So, and then I try to just build on that. And also I try to find like, okay, what's the quickest win I can make or help facilitate for this person, this team, and get those wins, because it's so important, especially in UX, to build trust, because a lot of folks still have misconceptions about what we might do, or they might think, oh, I can do research. I can put a design together really quickly. So, I try to be a walking commercial and entrepreneur, showing, I'm going to think ahead as much as I can. I'm going to give you a service that you really need. And I'm also going to show you why, we should be a part of the conversation.
You mentioned a couple of fascinating things there. So the first thing is that the active listening, right? So that's hard for a lot of people, right? They're kind of waiting for their turn to talk. So they're missing a lot of information that's potentially could be coming their way, and missing opportunity to do the follow-up question to dig deeper. So any tips on, how do you improve from waiting your turn versus giving the person that you're receiving this information from to get more insights, and, as you say, get past symptoms to maybe really what they're really trying to accomplish?
Yeah. I mean, I'm fortunate because I'm married and I'm also a researcher. So active listening saves the day, like all across the landscape for me. But, I have this hero, last name Portugal, Steve Portugal. And he wrote this book about just conducting interviews. And he's very analytical, scientific kind of guy, but he has this beautiful practice that he would employ with his teams. Anytime they were going to go do qualitative research and insert themselves into someone's home, someone's business, and observe, he would ask the cross-functional team to just, 5 minutes of quiet. They would do it together. And he would just ask them to like divorce themselves from their mental models, from their assumptions, from their preconceived ideas about whoever it was they were speaking with. Empty themselves out like a vessel and just be of service. And I've taught my teams to do that. Some of them kind of roll their eyes like, oh, are we going to start meditating and levitating? So however that, whatever you can swallow around that, empty yourself out. And it's not, also, it's a negotiation, whatever, so often it's one thing to conduct interviews. It's another thing to be in a room with stakeholders where, there's power plays going on, agendas, etc. And, this I took from reading this book called Nonviolent Communication, that you really want a win-win, right? So even I've worked with contentious fill in the blanks where, I grew up playing sports and I can be competitive and I like to win, but really this is not a basketball game as much as I would like it to be. This is business. And so how can we both come to the table and feel like, you know what? I've been heard. Because I've been heard, I can see the other sides. I know there's no one truth here. We're building something together. And, I try to come from the perspective of how can I make William feel like he's winning while still holding true to what I think is the right thing to do? What am I willing to give up? And where's my hard line where I'm like, you know what? I just can't in good conscience, knowing the data and knowing that we need to make data-driven decisions here, I can't give a yes to that. And if I'm the only person that's not giving a yes, understand that these are the implications of going in that direction. If you can sit with those, I've brought them to the table. But that's the likelihood of what's going to happen. And then tie it to business metrics, tie it to outcomes, and if that happens, it's going to affect our, ARR, or it's going to affect our activation metrics or whatever. Hit them where it hurts.
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned that tying it to the business outcome, because it can be very costly to get it wrong for a business, right? That they think they're listening to their customers, and they go out and they build something, but they're building something for a symptom that really not what they're looking for. Maybe they can make a little bit of money off of it, but they were trying to solve a problem. They had market relevance. So that's a very critical step there, right? Not only listening for the business, listening to the customers, but internally having the people inside the business and IT and all the different stakeholders listening to be on the same page. So we don't go in the wrong path and find out 6 months later, oops, we made a mistake. This is not going to work in the market. We just wasted time, right? Money and time. So I think that's very critical what you just talked about. And so even if they think the first 5 minutes is meditation, clearing your mind and get ready to actively listen to the folks around you seems like a very critical step there.
Yeah. And for some folks, sometimes I'll just treadmill before like a really, a meeting that I'm like, this is high stakes, right? Whatever it is that empties my vessel and lets me just, arrive fully, listening, fully present. I think that's the thing. Be present. I don't know about you, but when I see folks, looking down,
Yeah.
looking in their other monitor like this, I know they're not fully present. And sometimes I will even, say their name and ask them a direct question because I want to bring them into the moment. And there are ways to do that there are ways to do that and show that you respect yourself, your time, their time. You respect the goals of the meeting and letting them know this is a time to really be on point because we want to move this needle. We want to move this project, right? And especially with Gen AI at the forefront of everything right now, I think it's critical to understand this is the exact problem we're solving. And we know this is a problem because data analytics are cheap, right? Most orgs have some kind of data analysis going on. So we've looked at the data. We're predicting, we see a pattern and we're concerned about this pattern. So how are we going to address it, right? We have some strong hypotheses around it. So let's build a business case for it. And here's my strategy. I think that if we do 1, 2, 3, we'll achieve ABC. And these are the resources I need to do this. Here's a rough time plan for it. And we're going to experiment the heck out of this. So, here's the low hanging fruit we're going to go after. We expect to achieve these wins. If not, it's a fast pivot and we're not going to your point, waste a ton of money. But we're lessons learned, right? We're going to iterate and we're going to make something happen.
Yeah, and that's really important because that's the business imperative too. Business imperative today, right? Iterate fast, innovate fast, experiment, see what works, what doesn't work. So it could bring up a good point. So if the person in the meeting is constantly distracted, it could mean maybe they shouldn't be in the meeting, or they don't have the priority to really be in it. Maybe they need to send somebody else. So that's another opportunity for whoever is kind of leading the meeting to say, you know what, let's make a change here. Or maybe you don't want to do the initiative. Maybe you don't need to be here, or maybe you need a different venue to actually participate fully. So it's like there's some different opportunities for whoever's running the meeting to make some changes there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But William, haven't you found so many places just want it to be business as usual? Change is scary. Yeah. And oftentimes I'll ask, hey, let's have a quick debrief, right? What worked? What didn't work? And it's really interesting to see the pushback. And so what I found is I find remember we talked about, making those relationships in the beginning, understanding where the value is in a relationship, understanding who's going to champion, who has similar, values or pain points to our team, who speaks the same language, and when I say that, I mean like who gets it, right? Like who's the advocate for whatever this goal my team has or the business has. And I think pre-meetings and post-meetings, like one-on-ones with those people, that's where change can happen, right? Because everyone in the room collectively is distractive or as you said, maybe they don't need to be there. But I try to afterwards check in with someone who can make decisions, right? They have the power and the resources and the credibility to make decisions. And also, we're kind of on the same page, and I'll just check in with them. How did that go? What could have been done better? And because I'm a researcher, I'm happy to set up an informal poll in Teams or, whatever you're using, Slack, whatever, and just ask, like 5 critical folks from the meeting. How did that go? What could have been done better? What worked? What would you like to do next time? Everything's an iterative project, right? It's
Yeah.
all like software design, essentially.
Well, I love that whole concept of the debrief, right? Because some people don't really understand the value of it. They think the meeting's over and that's it. But like you say, you're missing incredible feedback if you don't do the debrief. Because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
the team doesn't know why they're being successful, right? Which is kind of a bad thing. You should kind of intentionally try things. And if it works and it works well, you want to be able to repeat that maybe down in the future. So the debriefs are really important in this process.
Yeah. And what's so funny, like I just hit it back to the metrics because I think, business, product owners, analysts, sales, IT, everyone measures what matters, right? And so how do you know that you're succeeding? Or how do you know that there's an opportunity to do something better? It's some kind of metric you're tracking, right? So even when I have, let's say I'm running a meeting or like with facilitation, where we met, what are the goals of this meeting, this fill in the blank, this app we're building, this experiment, this iteration? Okay. All right. Let's all be very clear about those goals from the onset. So restate those, for example, at the beginning of the meeting. Now, how will we track success? So some agreed upon measure, right? We're going to know that, for example, if you're building something, we're going to know that we're successful because NPS is going to increase, or let's say onboarding, some success metric around that, or we know that tickets are going to decline, support tickets, or whatever that measurement is, be clear, And so then when I have these one-on-one debriefs, I kind of think of it like that. Like, okay, we agreed this is the goal of the meeting. And so let's track it, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes if someone's giving me a little pushback on
Yeah.
meeting, I'll just like Slack that to them or just, think about what moves their needle, and come at it from the back door, maybe.
Yeah. I love that. Now we've been talking about this. So for some people who are not as experienced with UX, so that whole user experience. So we talk about the business and we talk about IT, but we got to talk about the other face, right? The end user, the client, the customer, right? Trying to figure out what they want, so the business can figure out what experience, what service, what product to go build. So let's talk a little bit about just the field of user UX, experience.
Sure. So I've been in this field for about 15 years, and I started in front end because I just thought that's where you make money. And in those 15 years, I've seen it change so much. So, the labels change, and usually the labels kind of speak to the zeitgeist going around, So I started as an information architect, which really is so important, and it's structural, right? How do we build this thing so that it's like a building so that folks can easily get into the front door, get to all the floors, understand what the floors are, understand when they get to these floors, what to do next to achieve this particular goal, right? What do we call the floors? How do we build them, etc. And it's so important. But I've seen as we've kind of gotten into this growth model, right, where it's like product-led growth, businesses don't really seem to care as much about that. And I find that sad. And so now there's this trend for UX to be all about in-app interactions. We've moved away, thankfully, from let's just make it pretty. That
Yeah.
used to be UX. I can't tell you how many product owners or engineers have brought me or my team like a balsamic wireframe and said, okay, do your pretty magic. And we've had
Yeah.
to encourage them and work with them and show them why, oh, we do so much more. Like the magic really is about research to begin with, right? Whether it's discovery or whether it's validation. So with discovery, that's fun. That's like green field, blue sky. There's this problem or there's this potential opportunity in the market. And we want to really explore, is it viable? And what are the customers or users' mental models around this experience? How do they think, right? And so, for example, in B2B SaaS, I have found most customers and users love a spreadsheet. And what's so funny
Yeah.
is that business and product and eng and sales, they want to give them, they want to give them that Ferrari or something that's really simple and beautiful and maybe not useful to them. So
Yeah.
UX is really great at building bridges. How do we take the business needs, the business goals, and marry those with the user goals and pain points? Oftentimes, when you start with an idea, right, which often is like C-suite person's idea that
Yeah.
their cousin in the elevator told them,
Yeah.
or whatever. They saw this
Yes.
cool interactive thing and now it's like, ooh, it's shiny and our competitors are doing it and they're amazing and, they're beating us in sales. Well, UX is really good at saying, okay, yeah, let's
Yeah.
go. Let's bring it. Let's do something amazing, but let's understand what our users really want. Let's really know what value means to them. And if the end of the day, and when I say spreadsheet, it's
Yeah.
most often in B2B SaaS, something that they can just dump all their data into, that they can manipulate as easily as a spreadsheet because they've been using spreadsheets forever and
Yeah.
they get it, right? And something they can quickly make a beautiful visualization around and then
Yeah.
quickly share out. So like, okay, we know those are the user needs. Like we know that's what gets them value. We also know we want to make it shiny and cool
Yeah.
and effortless and streamlined and yada, yada. So how do we do both of that? Right. And then,
Yeah.
and then UX is really amazing when we get to work on what I call a triad or cross-functional team. So when we have our product owner and when we have our eng, when we have our data analyst or scientist, when we have, anyone else really who needs to be there, but that's usually the core. And when we're all working together as a team. So much of UX is building that trust, whether it's with the user, whether it's with our stakeholders. And so it's really like a soft skill as well as if you can talk data, if you could talk like programming, if you can talk Python, if you can talk SQL, that's just icing on the cake, right? Because it's showing value to the other teams. And everything now is so complicated, right?
Yes.
Everything's so systems based or in the cloud or whatever.
Well, that's important to kind of, to bring that up about the value of UX is more than just aesthetics. You're really getting into the actual functionality, right? Like, how does it actually work, which is important, right? Because when you think like even designing the door, like, okay, does it push in? Does it pull out? Is it a faceplate? Is it a handle? Is it a doorknob? Like something simple as that. Like some people are thinking, was it red, blue, or yellow? Well, no. How's it? How do you actually operate the door? Right? Something as simple as how does it function is important. So I like the fact that and you actually guys do the experimentation or actually the discovery, right? You're observing. So if you're observing how people work through the door and figure out what they're actually trying to accomplish with that task to see if there's some areas of improvements. So let's talk about this, right? You do interviews, you can do observations, different ways in the UX space you can actually kind of discover what the user's real needs are, what they say and don't say to figure out, okay, if it's not the door, maybe it's how many buttons on the window, or if it's a mobile device, how do you interact with the mobile device, or how do you enter the information? Is it like 2 digits versus 4 digits? There's a lot of decisions to be made all across the board, right, from end to end. But to actually get to there, before you start programming all that, somebody has to figure out what this journey looks like for the end user. And that kind of starts back to like figuring out what the user is trying to do. So let's talk a bit about
Yeah.
that discovering process.
And also not every user is the same, right? So when you're building consumer facing apps or services, right? I think it's easier to assume a generality. So for example, DoorDash, Uber Eats, right? Most folks, they just want to easily find what they want and just have it in front of them as soon as they can, right? And when it comes to B2B SaaS, segmentation is really important. So, and the purchaser who you really need to court is most often not the user of the system.
Yeah.
So that's a segment right there, right? And then the users of the system may be branched off into those more technical, those that will spend their 3-day weekend immersed in something new because that just is exciting and fun. And,
Yes.
That matches their mental model, right? And then you have other types of users that are like, really, I'm going to a piano bar this weekend. I'm going hiking.
Yes.
So on Monday, I'm going to go talk to William because I know he's this guy that spent all 3 days just playing around with this thing. He broke it. He found what's amazing. I'm
Yeah.
going to just sidle up to William and see what he does, right?
I love it. Yes.
So when you think of it from that perspective, you're really talking workflows, you know? And so let's get back to the building analogy, right? Certain doors match certain segments, right? So if I'm that kind of user was hiking all weekend, I want this door that's just like super simple, right? Don't give me anything like that's going to be an architectural digest and but it looks like a window. I
Yes.
don't have the time, or I'm just going to go to that other building right down the street, right? Um, and so build the door simply, right? Assume that, William's going to go through that door too. He doesn't care, but maybe William wants to be challenged. Maybe he thinks, this is really like a maze he's going to discover. So let him go to the 4th floor. But, for that person who spent all weekend hiking, just send her to the 1st or 2nd floor, make it
Yes.
really easy. Like maybe everything she wants is in the lobby. Like she
Yes.
doesn't even have to go to a floor and she knows right away. She just wants a coffee. Just have that
Yes.
aroma, like be the first thing that meets her. She knows exactly where to go. Right. So that's where like real value. And that's where what's so important is to build, advocates of your customers, right? That's where I'm going to say, you know what? So-and-so, you got to try this building. You got to go through the front door and get that cookie. It is so freaking good. Like, right? That's how you build loyalty and that's how you build a brand, really.
Well, speaking of that, have you seen those new smart elevator systems where you go into the building, but and when you get inside, you have to do a panel, and like there's a bank of doors, elevator doors. You say I want to go to the 15th floor, and then one door open, and then you go to that particular door. You go in, and close, but there's nothing on the control panel. You can't actually pick the floor at that point. So it's a weird experience. Like it's like you told something outside where to go as opposed to going and actually choosing on the panel. It's a
Mm.
whole different experience, and people are looking around like there's nothing to do. It's about to go take me where I told it, where I instructed it to take me before I got inside the elevator. But it's just weird
I
to have it.
Yeah, I haven't seen that because I don't go out anymore. Like, I'm always just here. But putting smart and elevator together, to me, that's like such a juxtaposition because I've
Yeah.
never found elevators to be usable ever
Yes.
since. There's something about the structure of the buttons and when Braille, which is super
Yes.
important, was introduced. I always find like, I don't know, there's a disconnect. So
Yeah.
and then like elevators would have the ads and stuff. And
Yeah.
so I've always found them like literally I have not been in an elevator for so long, which is fortunate, I think. But I remember when I used to work at ADP, they had like their elevator system was like way too complicated because, it was high security, all
Yes.
this, customer data that we'd keep secret or whatever. I don't know why. But I remember their elevators were so unusable. And either that or they just didn't work. But it's such a good example of what are we really doing here? Maybe your example, is it too simple? Are
Yeah.
we, do users need to interact with the elevator to feel some element of control and accuracy? Like these are, and when you get back to those UX research methods, observation, like some of the best, most fun work I've ever done was redesigning public transportation systems. end to end. So from observing someone plan their route in their home, following them perhaps to purchase the ticket if they didn't purchase it online, observing them use the bus or light rail, observing them transfer, and then potentially even getting on a bike to go to the university or whatever, right? I bring this up because I really think even apps, even websites, it's more service design. It's no longer just what they're doing in the actual application, right? So we talked about this, I think, previously in the past about, let's say, Zillow. When someone's looking for a home, how much of it is relegated to the laptop? I
Yeah.
don't think it really is anymore, right? I mean, maybe they see things as they drive in their car. Ooh, that house is for sale. It's amazing. That's exactly what I want. What do? Do they pull over? If you're like me, I love everything about homes. I'll pull over. I'll take a picture. I'll get on my phone and I'll start on the Zillow app, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about it all day, and maybe
Yeah.
I'm at work and I'm
Yeah.
dreaming, and I'm doing something else. I'm calling my husband. I'm excited about it. I'm reaching out to my best friend who happens to be a realtor. So these kinds of things. It's so much about all these
Yeah.
multimodal touch points. And sometimes you're writing stuff on paper. So
Yeah.
how do you account for all of these things unless you're observing, you know? And sometimes we can do that with a really good data analytics platform if we have like multimodal inputs, right? And if it's really smart, and if you happen to be at a company that has a great like data warehouse where all this knowledge is stored, you can start thinking about what's done on the mobile, what's done on,
Yeah.
maybe a computer, what's done in the call center, so like my new passion aside from Gen AI is service design, is thinking
Yeah.
about this overarching experience, because I think that's how businesses are going to get ahead, right? I mean,
Yes.
soon we're going to be having fridges that have all this data, right?
Yes.
We kind of already do. So how do we pull that all together?
Well, I love that thing about the experience. Anything like going to the hospital, going to a restaurant, and you see the technology kind of embedded all over the place. And then still you can see the pen and paper, right? You go to the doctor's office, and a lot of them still get the clipboard and the pen. And then later on, you go to the back, somebody has a pad, and then there's a computer on the next side, and they're hooking things up to you. So it's a kind of hodgepodge of different manual and automatic tech working together, but it's all serving the humans, right? The people doing the service and those consuming. Or even a restaurant, right? How do you pay, right? Sometimes they give you a little device. Sometimes they take your credit card. So it's all these different ways. And for the user, it's like, it can be disorienting, right? So depending on which restaurant or which hospital you go to, the experiences can be completely different. And it's all because the way of somebody designed something that required both the people and the technology working together. So that's why I love the talking about UX, because someone is the business is looking to make a change or transform. They got to send people in to observe how everybody's interacting, where are areas for opportunities to actually make improvements in the actual like experience of actually going in there. So great field.
Yeah. And you get these aha moments, right? Like, because, you and I were just heads down, knees deep in what we do all the time, right? And sometimes it's so great just to pull yourself out of that and watch real humans do real human things. And then you get to see like, wow, I never even thought that was a thing, right? I thought we were making their lives easier by having all this high tech, and they just want to throw down some cash.
Yes,
So,
they want to give us their
oh,
money. We're making it harder. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, people still use money. People still use pen and paper and then you got to start pushing against that and saying, why? Why? Maybe they feel like they have more control if they can write it down or if they can use cash, because maybe what they want to do, maybe they're on a budget, right? This economy is real tough right now. So maybe they walk into that restaurant with $37.50 because that is their budget, right? That's important to them. That's a need that we're not serving right now. So we don't necessarily, and then this is where UX will say, okay, this is an insight. They have this need and our competitors are serving that need. So how might we? That's my favorite phrase.
Okay.
How might we? Right? Because so often folks just, they want to lead with solutioning. And once again, we're bringing
Yeah.
in all of our mental models, all of our business needs, all of our objectives, and we're shutting out the user, the customer, right? So how might we meet that need for them to have control, for them to follow a budget? It doesn't necessarily mean that we still accept cash. How might we innovate that? What more could we do? Right? Hey, they also have this need to forget all their problems for an hour
Yes.
and a half.
Yes.
Is there a way we can combine both of those and do something really exciting? Oh, and look, it also like checks off these business requirements and it helps us reach this OKR. Like that's really where the creativity can come, right? So UX is so much more than window dressing. It's like really getting to those back end issues, right? And then we need people in product and sales and eng and IT and marketing to come bring their brilliance and say, what if? Or did you ever think, or we have this data that triangulates that supports that. Oh, we have this data that negates what you observed. And then we can say, oh, we're not solving the problem. We're scratching the
Yeah.
surface. How might we go deeper? What kind of quant and qual strategies can we build to get the fuller picture? Right?
I love that. So we're making more insights in what the user is doing, what potentially could be improvements, um, leveraging data that we're collecting, right? So a lot of companies are still struggling with the amount of data they have and they're making use of it, right? So we're talking about Gen AI. What can we do with that? What's the promise of that? But we still to make sure we have the human aspects always at the center of what we're trying to do. Because we're making a business case to go make investments, spend time and money to make a market impact here. So this is like an exciting time, I think, for about all the new tech that's available, what's right on the horizon, and what we can do with it. So as you look maybe for the next decade or so, Monique, and kind of put your futuristic glasses on, what are you thinking about? You know, you're excited about UX, and I mean, you're talking about AI and what's possible. Any kind of closing thoughts about what we should be looking for?
Sure. So it's funny because when I first started delving into AI like a year plus ago, um, there were, it was a rather apocalyptic, right? Like the robots are going to take over.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, what is this going to do? Sorry, my leg what is this going to do for, underrepresented groups? Like, people working on the factory, etc. The robots are going to take over. And then the more and more I got into it and started like really using Chat GPT as my assistant, as my data analyst, as my mentor, I realized this is going to affect white collar workers.
Yeah.
That's where we're at, right?
Yes.
We're still trying to put those robots together, but right now it's all about Gen AI in the form of Chat GPT, which is my personal favorite tool. But you know, there's 15 other large language models out there. I'm really excited about Microsoft Copilot because I think that's a huge trend where it's truly multimodal in that if I'm using Microsoft products and Microsoft operating system, whatever, um, it's the Gen AIs interspersed in every single workflow that I have. So it's not limited or barriered in the way that, for example, Chat GPT is right now, right? So, um, there's so much going on with Chat GPT 4 Turbo, right? You can invite teams. You can, use it for hardcore data analysis if you're in the analysis mode. you can use it for enterprise, and you can bring all your private information in, and you don't have those privacy concerns,
Yeah.
right? But ironically, enterprise is where I think we're going to have the slowest movement, because if you've ever worked in a large company, change is hard, right?
Yeah.
Change is hard. Plus, you have to put a really smart committee together, that has, decision maker, C-suite, but has all the active players from all the different groups. And before you even launch GenAI, you have to talk about, what is our stance on ethics? What is our stance on privacy? What is our stance on how far we go in this? What are the guardrails? What's the box we're going to start with, right? Where are the boundaries? What are the best practices? What have we experimented with, and what can we launch right away with the least amount of detrimental impact, right? What are those fast wins? Much easier to do in a startup, much easier to
Yeah.
do. But my recommendation, and I post a lot about this on LinkedIn, is pick a model. Mine's ChatGPT-4. Break it. Make it
Yeah.
yours. Use Dolly 2 integrations. Use it, the best use case, and this goes across the table, whether you're an enterprise, whether you're a student, whether you're whatever. The best use case is take those really laborious workflows and automate them. So as a researcher, let's say my most painful moments are qualitative analysis. I spend so much time delving into, sheets and sheets and sheets and sheets of data. How might I optimize that? Well, I can use ChatGPT-4 Turbo's analysis mode. I can now upload those files, and I can have it parse for me. Now,
Nice.
here's where the human element
Yeah.
comes in, right? Here's where that smart elevator just doesn't work. If I take if I take the GPT's output at face value, I might have hallucinations. I might have themes that just don't align with the project goals, right? Don't align with the goals of the research. Sure, it's great that everyone wore a blue shirt, but is that going to
Yeah.
help us onboard people? So this is where I have to be. It's almost like I think of GPT as my super smart intern, right?
I like
This
that. Yeah.
this intern is so smart. She spent her whole life swallowing the internet. She's just a data geek, right? But I don't want her pulling from so and so's blog post about, you know, ghosts. Like,
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
give her those parameters, and I have to train her essentially. So train your GPTs. Just put in the hours. Find out for those laborious workflows what works well. What are the questions I need to ask? Where do I need to push back? What I love to tell people is take those 5 experts that you follow for whatever the subject is, right? And train your GPT to think like them. Tell them, take these 5 experts, digest their work, focus on these 5 books, and tell me what the high points are. They give me the high points. Then I say, great. I know they're thinking in the way I want them to think. I know that they're using the correct lenses to analyze. Okay, great. Now I'm going to upload these files, and these files are data of X, Y, and Z customers. And the goals of the research were 1, 2, 3. And, we're using these success metrics. We want increased onboarding. We want increased activation. We want increased whatever. How would you analyze this data to ensure that you're meeting the goals, that we will hit these targets, and that blah, blah, blah? Then I look at the output. Here's what was good about that output. Way to go with 1, 2, 3. Here's what you can do better. I want you to focus on blah, 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 right? So I'm continuously refining what the GPT is
Nice.
giving me. And then once I've done that, I can build like a stable chat where every time I want to analyze, I just change values. So maybe the goals of the research changed. Maybe the file uploads changed, but it just takes what used to take me a week will now take me 2 hours.
That's amazing. So training your ChatGPT like your own intern. I love it.
Yeah. Or
a lot
mentor.
Of opportunity. Here we go. A lot of opportunities out there.
Yeah. Yeah. But if we can't familiarize ourselves and get comfortable, start with your personal life. Build a GPT around travel or around dating, around whatever it is that you're excited about, right? Take those learnings and those best practices, make all your mistakes there. Ask all your dumb questions there and refine it. And then think about how you might bring that into your business or, your team. Or how might you be that advocate? Be the first one in your group or your company saying, this is how we're going to use GenAI. And, go to your manager and say, look, we have these problems. We need to solve them. And here's a way we can do that using GenAI. And look, it's going to take a week. And look, it's not going to break anything because all we're talking about is an internal workflow that we're going to optimize. Start there, optimize the workflow, show results, and then start thinking bigger. Here's a business case. Here's how we're going to solve, bigger pain point, and just build. As your confidence grows, the impact that you're going to have is going to grow.
That's fantastic, Monique. Hey, this has been a great show, a great discussion.
Thank you. It's been fun.
It has. All right, we're going to wrap it up right there for today. This has been another episode of the Smart IT Podcast. Until next time, take care. Thanks for joining another episode of the Smart IT Podcast, where we explore what's next for IT and disrupt the status quo, simplify the complex, and reduce risk together. If you like what you hear, please like, subscribe, and leave your comments. And for more Smart IT wisdom, check out my website at williamreed.info.